But that's Pakistan's own making. I have seen it happening. When I was Deputy High Commissioner, the Taliban arose then, and with Pakistan's help, then they established a government controlling a large part of Afghanistan's territory. Um, until then, 9/11 came and the Americans came back, and Pakistan turned overnight from a supporter of the Taliban to the frontline state in the war against terror.
Right.
Uh, you know, but that was a tricky, half-hearted U-turn. Even as they became a frontline state for the Americans, they continued to harbor the Taliban, support them, and so on. Eventually, they were victorious. So
Mm-hmm.
when Pakistanis, even in the 90s, I used to read them, only three or four. Those days, they thought that they had defeated the mighty Soviet Union and they had these large number of jihadis at their disposal, whom they could use to have strategic depth in Afghanistan, whom they could use to, create terror in Kashmir, etc., etc.
Welcome to the gist on Strat News Global. I'm Ramananda Sengupta. Our guest today is Ambassador Sharat Sabharwal, former High Commissioner to Pakistan and Ambassador to Uzbekistan. He's a columnist for various newspapers, and he's also the author of India's Pakistan Conundrum, Managing a Complex Relationship, which is a must-have for anybody who's interested in the subcontinent. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir, at such short notice.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your coming in today. So let me just take it from the top, sir. Pakistan has sort of been moving from crisis to crisis ever since independence. How is this particular crisis different?
Well, as you know, Pakistan has been a troubled and a troublesome state, a dysfunctional state, almost right from the beginning, from its inception. Now, it faces multiple crises at the moment, three major crises: economic crisis, a political crisis, and the rising wave of TTP terror. To be sure, all these problems have been there earlier also. The difference now is they are far more intense and far more intractable than before. I'm sure we'll come to each one of those issues separately when we can talk more about them.
Yes, sir. Today, let's start with the political stuff first. Today I heard that, the PMLL president of Punjab, Rana Sanaullah, Sanaullah, who said that, former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif will be back in Pakistan on October 21st. And he said he is going to be under protective bail and would surrender to the court after his welcome reception. Now, do you think he would have done that without having some kind of a deal already organized?
I would think, he waited for the last Chief Justice to retire, Umar Ata Bandial. As you know, that Chief Justice was ill-disposed towards the government, Shahbaz Sharif government.
Right.
He tilted very clearly towards Imran Khan. His sympathies were very clear. So they waited for Qazi Faiz Isa, the current Chief Justice, to take over. That in itself should be some kind of reassurance for them. As you know, Qazi Faiz Isa has some grouse against Imran Khan, because Imran Khan's government had filed a reference against him in the Supreme Judicial Council. So the expectation probably will be that with Qazi Faiz Isa there won't be much of a trouble for Nawaz Sharif. Although I must say, Umar Ata Bandial, just before he laid down office, he reopened the cases against politicians, cases which had been closed under a law passed by the parliament. He declared that law null and void. So all those cases have been reopened, including some against Nawaz Sharif. So he'll have to face those cases. But I think the expectation is that he would get some kind of consideration from the current judicial dispensation. And I would agree with you. Yes, there could have been some signals from the security establishment also.
Because if I recall right, I think the current Chief Justice was also, I think, against Nawaz Sharif being sort of, penalized for the last time, when he was actually penalized for not being honest and truthful or whatever.
Yes,
In that case,
that was a completely very dubious kind of accountability, rushed through by the Supreme Court under the directions of the Chief Justice in a manner and at a speed which is so uncharacteristic of the normal judicial system in Pakistan. So that was dubious accountability. That's quite clear. And I think Qazi Faiz Isa had also given a judgment, which is being talked of these days also, against the role of the army when Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, mounted an agitation in Islamabad during the PMLN government.
right,
It was the army which brokered a deal, and they were seen distributing money to the protesters as they left. So that demonstration, that agitation was organized essentially to pressurize the PMLN government, and the army played a role there. Now, Qazi Faiz Isa had given a decision against that role, and that's why the army then engineered a reference through the Imran Khan government to the Supreme Judicial Council against Qazi Faiz Isa. So he defended himself. The complaints were against some dealings, money dealings of his wife. And they were able to explain things, and the Supreme Court then eventually exonerated him. But I think that
okay,
complaint is in his mind.
I see. So there is something called the, I think, Supreme Court Practice and Procedure Bill, which sort of aims to curtail the Chief Justice's powers a little. Do you think that has something to do with this, with Nawaz Sharif's getting some relief?
Actually, that was aimed at the previous Chief Justice, Umar Ata Bandial. As I said, he leaned towards Imran Khan, and he gave some decisions, important decisions against Shahbaz Sharif government.
Right.
Now, what he was doing was, he was exercising his suo motu power to take up some cases. B, he was constituting benches of his own liking. He was excluding judges who he thought would not side with him, including those he thought would side with him. So that law was passed by the parliament to deprive him of those powers. And it was he imposed a sort of a ban on it, and he said it would not become applicable. That case has been taken up by Qazi Faiz Isa in a full court. All judges he has included in that bench. And I think a hearing took place even today. Now, the idea was not to deprive the Supreme Court of those powers. The idea was to disperse the powers of the Chief Justice to take suo motu notice and to constitute benches. And as I said, it was aimed more at Umar Ata Bandial. Qazi Faiz Isa, although he has his complaint, against Imran Khan, although he has, he's expected, to be more favorable to PMLN and other parties which were with them. But we'll have to see how he proceeds, as cases come up to him, because he's also seen as a very upright person. So whether he'll go all the way to, defend them or defend Nawaz Sharif, that will become clear in the days to come.
But I'm curious, sir, wasn't Nawaz Sharif once sort of kicked out simply because he was trying to get better trade ties with India?
There were various reasons. When he became prime minister the third time, look, he had an uneasy history with the army all along, with his army chiefs. He fell out with all of them. In one case, then Musharraf mounted a coup against him and he was thrown out of power. When he came to power a third time, he did a few things. Not only the India relationship, which of course the army wasn't happy with whatever he wanted to do, but more importantly, he took up cases against Musharraf, including a treason case, for the emergency that he had declared in 2006, I think November or December 2006. And that was the last thing that the army wanted to see. You see, if one former army chief is punished, it lays open all retired army chiefs to that kind of action. And the fact is, all of them, when they head the army, they have been going far beyond the limits of the constitution. Each and every one of them. So each one and every one of them can be hauled up. I think that is something which the army didn't like. And then, of course, Nawaz Sharif's tendency in general to have the upper hand as the civilian elected prime minister over the army. That is something that they like. So then Bajwa, along with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, then Chief Justice, organized this, what I call dubious accountability. And a case was rushed through Nawaz Sharif in the lower court at a speed which is totally uncharacteristic of the slow-moving Pakistani judicial system. Then, of course, he was disqualified, so he lost power, and then Shahid Khaqan Abbasi continued. He became prime minister. The MLN government continued, but then eventually in 2018, the army turned the electoral field completely against PMLN and in favor of Imran Khan, and brought Imran Khan to power. But of course, they fell out with him. That, of course, is a different.
Speaking of Imran Khan, now with so many defections and arrests of top leaders, I believe Qureshi is also in jail and he's also unknown. Is this the end of the road for Imran Khan and PTI?
I think for the coming elections, yes, because Asim Munir, the current chief of army staff, who is very influential now, actually behind the scenes, he's wielding a lot of influence on the political process. He would like to see Imran Khan come back to power because Imran Khan, when he was prime minister, Asim Munir became DG ISI, and Imran Khan moved him out within months. I think 4 or 5 months to bring in someone he was fond of. Faz Hamid, who then, of course, wasn't made army chief, and he lost out. He wanted to become army chief with the support of Imran Khan. So Asim Munir wouldn't like him to come back. He was released in one case, the Tosha Khana case, by the High Court, but then he was rearrested and continues to be in detention in another case. Mishandling of a classified message received from the Pakistan embassy in Washington, D.C. So the army's intentions are quite clear. Most of the senior leaders are in detention. And what they can do is they can make sure that no worthwhile candidate takes up a PTI ticket when the elections come. Now, the problem, of course, is that in spite of his being under arrest, he remains very popular. A Gallup poll, which was conducted in June, and the results were released, I saw them recently in the Pakistani press, shows his popularity rating at 60%. Compared to 36% for Nawaz Sharif, who has been the most popular politician in Punjab, the largest province in the past. So that's a problem for the army. I did see some reports in the social media. I have no confirmation of that. That the army may be trying to talk to him, bring some more reason in him. I don't know whether that is true or to what extent they would succeed. My own feeling is the preponderant possibility is chances are that he will be kept out of the next election. He and maybe not necessarily his party, but they'll make sure that no worthwhile candidate takes their ticket. So the chances of success are minimal. But of course, you can't write him for all times to come. Look, prime ministers ousted in the past, whether Benazir or Nawaz Sharif, have come back. So what happens in the long run, we don't know.
In fact, for all you know, it probably gets them some sympathy to come back the next time.
Yes, it depends. It depends, these generals keep on playing these games. So there is, I can imagine a situation, a future general who is unhappy with the parties around. And he feels that, look, this man has mellowed down. He's learned his lessons. He's willing to toe our line. And some kind of agreement is struck with him and he comes back. Will that happen? We don't know. As I said, that's very difficult to predict.
Of course. In fact, in Pakistan, anyway, most things are very difficult to predict. You don't know which way it's going.
You know the
Sir,
one.
let's talk economics, sir. I mean, I'm hearing that things are quite a mess in economic
Mm,
terms.
mm,
They seem to somehow bail themselves out of a default, but I think they still owe a lot of money, which is going to come up soon for repayment. What
mm.
happens then?
Well, they had the sword of default hanging on them for the last 1 year or so,
Hmm.
until they got a $3 billion 9-month deal from the IMF.
That's right.
The idea seems to have been to give them a deal to tide over the elections period.
Hmm.
And then the IMF deals with the new government. Now, elections
Right.
themselves, when they take place, that's an uncertainty.
Hmm.
That has happened. That prevented the default. And now we hear, and there are reports that that deal was facilitated by the Americans because Pakistan sold munitions to Ukraine through
That's
Western
right.
countries, went through Western
That's right.
countries,
Hmm.
but Pakistan sold munitions to Ukraine.
Hmm.
So then the Americans exercised their influence with IMF and ensured that the deal was struck. But as you
Hmm.
rightly said, Pakistan has to repay 75 or $76 billion over the next 3 years, repayment of
That's right.
loans and so on. So what
Hmm.
can they do? A, they can borrow from the commercial market, where the possibilities are very limited because of Pakistan's macroeconomic situation.
Hmm.
B, they can get money from their friends, China, Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc., or ask them to reschedule repayment of their loans. That they have been doing, but that doesn't solve the problem entirely. And three, they seek restructuring of their entire debt. That they may have to do at some stage.
Hmm.
If that doesn't happen, they may default again. But what is certain is that the Pakistan economy will come back time and again to the breaking point, as it has been in the past,
Hmm.
unless the government takes some structural measures to remedy the problems of the economy. And one of them, important one, is to tax the rich. The managing director of IMF told the caretaker prime minister very recently, you tax the rich. You keep on telling me your poor have problems. You ask me to give you exemptions for that. Tax your rich and help the poor. Now, is Pakistani establishment willing to do that? Pakistani establishment headed by the army, because all the rich people, whether they are agriculturists, whether they are industrialists, the army businesses, they all get big tax breaks. Are they willing to give them up? So unless Pakistan deals with the structural problems and the biggest problem of Pakistan's economy is Pakistan's adversarial attitude towards India. That
Hmm.
imposes very heavy burdens on Pakistan's, unbearable burdens on Pakistan's economy. And the gap is growing, and that burden keeps on growing as far as smaller Pakistani economy is concerned. That is
Hmm.
something which is never acknowledged. I see so many articles written by well-meaning Pakistanis on how to improve the economy. They fail to talk of this one particular aspect. So unless Pakistan deals with all these problems, as I said, the economy will keep on coming back to the breaking point time and again, even if
Hmm.
there is no default. That if there is a default, that will be a very serious situation, will bring a lot of hardship to the people and cause further instability in Pakistan.
Right. Right. Now, you mentioned $75 billion. Is does that include the money for CPEC and all that stuff that you already owe to China?
Yes, it's all told that they have to repay.
Hmm.
Actually, Chinese debt is only about 25% of the overall debt.
Okay.
About $130 billion, and Chinese is
Hmm.
about 25%. Some of them is long term, some of that is short term. The
Right.
rest is commercial debt, which is all short term, or
Hmm.
multilateral institutions, or Paris Club countries, and so on.
Hmm.
But the next 3 years, all told, they have to pay 75 to $76 billion, and they just
That's a
don't
lot.
earn that money. Their exports are
That's.
not enough. After taking into account imports, they've
Hmm.
been getting about $25 billion or so as remittances from Pakistanis working abroad. But
Hmm.
all these things put together, after taking into account imports, which are also essential, are
Right.
not enough to meet those requirements.
Hmm. So coming back to the CPEC, I mean, it really hasn't met any of the goals that the Chinese had set for itself on CPEC. Is that something, what they call too big to fail thing for China? So they'll
Well,
keep
look,
on putting something into it.
what is clear is this: the CPEC projects have not produced the kind of foreign exchange and earnings that would have been expected to meet the debt burden that CPEC has imposed on Pakistan. So that debt burden has worsened things for Pakistan in terms of its debt, in terms of its repayment capacity, etc., etc. I think, and then there are serious security problems. Chinese nationals and Chinese interests have been attacked in Pakistan.
Right.
That remains a very touchy point with the Chinese. There are indications now that the Chinese are becoming more cautious towards new projects proposed by Pakistan under CPEC. In fact, there was a meeting which took place. There is a joint committee of the two sides which considers CPEC projects, old and new. A meeting took place almost last year, and joint minutes couldn't be finalized almost for 1 year. They were issued recently,
Just recently.
very recently. And they show that the Chinese refuse to accept a number of projects proposed by the Pakistanis. So that tells you that they are becoming cautious. They don't want to sink their money unless things improve. So that is quite clear. But look, there are two components of CPEC here. One is the route linking Xinjiang to Gwadar.
Right.
Now that is strategically extremely important for the Chinese. That is one of the exit routes for the Chinese to the sea, bypassing the maritime choke points in the east, which always remain a matter of worry for them, the Malacca Strait, etc. So that route they would maintain at all costs. Security problems, money, whatever is needed. The second is, projects, whether in energy or free trade zones or, various other infrastructure projects, the dams, etc., etc., which were essentially meant to, bring some greater activity in the Pakistani economy, in the economy of an ally of China. That they may have to reassess and see how it moves forward. How far that segment succeeds, we don't know. But the route, I'm sure they will make every possible effort to make sure that it is sustained.
But sir, I mean, you said that they're not willing to invest more. Wouldn't that again impact the growth of the project itself? I mean, if you're not willing to add more funds into it, that would in turn slow down recovery.
No. I think I should correct that impression. They are continuing with the existing projects which have been accepted. This is the new projects which Pakistan had proposed in various areas, in energy, in infrastructure, various other projects.
Right.
Many of those projects that did not accept the new projects. But they haven't discontinued financing the existing ongoing projects.
Oh, okay. And also, as you said, it's from the port itself also is the route to the a sea route which opens up, as you said. That's also a very big factor for them.
That is an important factor. That's one of the exit routes for them to the sea. Bypassing the maritime choke points. That essentially is potentially also a staging point, the Makran coast for Chinese Navy into the Arabian Sea and beyond.
Right. Sir, we've talked about political issues, we talked about the economic issues, and economic issues, from what little I have heard from my friends there, this time it's pretty bad in the sense that, people are actually digging into their savings to sort of pay for daily, expenses. But on top of that, as you said, there's terrorism with the TTP sort of stepping up its act. But apart from TTP, earlier you also mentioned Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the NWFP, all those areas. How does one resolve that? Because that's also a very, not a good thing on the economy itself or on the political situation.
But that's Pakistan's own making. I have seen it happening. When I was Deputy High Commissioner, the Taliban arose then, and with Pakistan's help, then they established a government controlling a large part of Afghanistan's territory. Until then, 9/11 came and the Americans came back, and Pakistan turned overnight from a supporter of the Taliban to the frontline state in the war against terror. Uh, you know, but that was a tricky, half-hearted U-turn. Even as they became a frontline state for the Americans, they continued to harbor the Taliban, support them, and so on. Eventually, they were victorious. So, well, Pakistanis, even in the 90s, I used to read them, only three or four. Those days, they thought that they had defeated the mighty Soviet Union, and they had these large number of jihadis at their disposal, whom they could use to have strategic depth in Afghanistan, whom they could use to, create terror in Kashmir, etc., etc. So very few Pakistanis, but well-meaning Pakistanis even then said this is a bad card. Please don't use it. And then Pakistanis ensured their victory in 2021 when everyone was saying that they will not cut off their ties with TTP. TTP has fought alongside them. They have ideological affinities. The Taliban also remain worried that if they start getting tough with the TTP, many of their warriors could go to the Islamic State, which is a big problem for them. So therefore, the Taliban are not going to act against TTP. Pakistan has been asking them to do so. They have tried multiple times, but the number of attacks, the intensity of attacks has only grown. And I saw a report recently that the number of security personnel killed over the last 7-8 months was the highest in the last 8 years for a single year. So the situation is very serious, and it's not going to change. It's not going to change because it's a monster that the Pakistanis have created, and it's very, very difficult to control it.
And
So
that monster is coming.
the political process will have no impact on it. Unless they completely revise their policy, now that I don't know if that's possible at the stage at which they have reached.
They're also having a problem with the Taliban government in Afghanistan. How does one deal with that?
No, that's exactly what I told you. They ensured the victory of Taliban. They helped the victory of Taliban in August 2001.
Right.
But you see, any Afghanistan government in Afghanistan, which gets a foothold there are hundreds of issues with Pakistan that Afghanistan has, including transit trade. There are difficulties there. The question of Durand Line, which hasn't been recognized by any Afghan government, including the Taliban. They haven't recognized the Durand Line. So this should have been clear to the Pakistanis. Pakistan, as a neighbor of Afghanistan, could have been relevant to Afghanistan in many positive ways. But instead of that, in trying to gain a strategic depth and, have a government of their choice in Afghanistan, they have today created a situation that any government in Kabul will have many problems with them. And that's what is happening with the Taliban. They do have some elements within the Taliban very sympathetic to them. But overall, they haven't got the kind of response that they were expecting from the Taliban. It's not been anything but smooth sailing that they might have expected.
I see. So, if Nawaz Sharif comes back and he sort of, becomes, starts the campaign on behalf of the PMNL, what does that mean for Bilawal Bhutto? I think that's going to impact them quite badly because, the PPP as such.
Look, they PMLN and PPP, they were together in the Shahbaz Sharif government essentially to counter Imran Khan. And now that Imran Khan's challenge has been contained, largely contained, they are pursuing their own interests. So PMLN wants to retain its dominance in the largest province, Punjab. PPP wants to retain its dominance in Sindh. But PPP was marginalized in the last two elections completely in Punjab. PPP would like to regain some seats in Punjab also, especially in southern Punjab, where they have been powerful and influential in the past. Now that clashes with the interests of PMLN. So they are pursuing different interests. That's quite clear, and they will continue to do so. In fact, I may say that the army, which has, which was with these two parties again to counter Imran Khan, is now will pursue its own interests. The army wouldn't like any of the major players to get a decisive majority in the next election, whenever it takes place. They would like to have a splintered parliament, a splintered national assembly, a hung national assembly, where they can create a majority of their own choice with smaller parties which are beholden to them. Those parties they can manipulate and take them to one side or the other side. So they would like to have a hung assembly where they can use those parties to craft a majority of their own choice.
So some
So
of the PTI,
everyone is pursuing his own interest now.
So some of the splinter groups from the PTI, I mean, they've started off new parties of their own. They would also be then sort of
Yes.
kingmakers at some level.
Look, there are three parties, older parties, which are there with the army. That is PMLQ of Chaudhry Shujat Hussain, then MQM Pakistan, which was created by the army, and then Balochistan Awami Party. The caretaker prime minister belonged to that party. He was one of the founders of that, which was again created. They were defectors from PMLN at the behest of the army who created Balochistan Awami Party. So you have three parties there. Then Istehkam, Pakistan, created by sugar baron Jahangir Tareen, who is close to the army. And then another party, PTI parliamentarians, created by the former chief minister of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, again close to the army. So the number of parties which the army can manipulate has grown. And that may help the army, in getting a hung assembly eventually.
So essentially, it's still the army always calling the shots. Nothing else has changed on that part.
No, certainly not. I mean, when Asim Munir became the army chief, for some time he was finding his feet. But post May 9, trouble against the army and attacks on army installations instigated by PTI and Imran Khan, he has consolidated his position and he's calling the shots. The army will need Nawaz Sharif to contain the PTI challenge, Imran Khan challenge in Punjab, because he is the most influential. He is the charismatic leader of his party, not Shahbaz Sharif. So the army has a dilemma here. They'll need Nawaz Sharif. But I don't think they would trust Nawaz Sharif if he were to become a prime minister, the prime minister again. If it comes to a situation where PMLN wins a majority and can form a government, the army's choice may be for Shahbaz Sharif more than Nawaz Sharif.
Because Shahbaz Sharif has been
more pliable. And as you might have heard recently, Nawaz Sharif again started talking in London of accountability against Qamar Javed Bajwa, former army chief, and former chief justices. And then Shahbaz had to rush back to London and to convince him to quieten down for the time being. This may not be to the liking of the army. How long will he stay quiet? I don't know. Knowing him as I do, I think he will again try and assert himself if he were in a position to do so. And that would not be to the liking of the army.
So, which means, I mean, as I said, nothing really has changed that much in Pakistan over the last few years. In fact, the army, if anything, has become stronger.
No, it remains front and center in the calculations of all political players. It is playing an important role. It has got a caretaker government of its own choice. It was given greater powers through a law passed by the parliament, of search and carrying out investigations and so on, which it can use against its opponents. It has got a much bigger share in the economic policy making. A special investment facilitation council has been created, and Army Chief is a member of that council along with the Prime Minister. And he's been talking to groups of businessmen from Karachi and Lahore recently to reassure them of an economic plan to improve the economy. And he's talking of bringing investment up to $100 billion from Gulf countries. I don't think anyone is going to throw their money sink their money in Pakistan. Investment that Pakistan can bring, even by selling its assets, would depend upon its macroeconomic environment, the absorption capacity of the economy, and the law and order situation. All three are bad. So, this is again a mirage being shown by a new army chief to the public, which is suffering. because of the economic factors. Similar mirages have been shown by earlier dictators and civilian leaders in the past also.
That's true, sir. So we seem to be sort of running out of time. So let me just ask you a final question. Let's talk about bilateral relations. Since the Kashmir thing, we have downgraded relations and everything. Do you see any chance of it sort of going back to at least what it was before the Kashmir thing happened?
Look, Pakistan took a very unreasonable stand. They didn't have an effective answer to that move by India, 5th of August 2019 move. So Imran Khan took some steps which were, like cutting your nose to spite your face. He suspended trade, for example, which hurts the Pakistani economy more than it hurts the Indian
Absolutely.
economy. And he also said there could be no dialogue with India until India withdrew that measure. Now, that's not going to happen. Then we heard of some fallback position saying if India were to restore statehood to Jammu and Kashmir, and then it may be possible to talk. Now, statehood would come when it comes. The government of India is committed to it, but it will not come in response to a Pakistani demand. So I think things have to become clear within Pakistan first. Is it going to be an election? Who comes to power? What is the attitude of Asim Munir? We are not very clear about that at the moment. Or, as some people say, will the caretaker government stay on a little longer? It's only when things are stable in Pakistan that something can move forward. At that time, the Pakistanis, there may be a climb down by the Pakistanis. They also realize that they are they painted themselves into a very tight corner. At that time, some possibilities may reopen to stabilize the relationship and more, to add to the ceasefire, which seems to be lasting by and large on the line of control, which was restored in February 2021, and to bring back some things of the past which were lost. By that I mean trade or diplomatic relations at High Commissioner's level, or better communication, transportation facilities, etc., etc. But that's not for now. That's not for the immediate.
But given that it keeps moving from crisis to crisis, I don't think that's likely to happen anytime soon now.
No, as I said, things have to become clear in Pakistan. And look, we shouldn't forget, we are also entering our electoral cycle.
Of course.
So this is not the moment for any forward movement. See clarity what happens in Pakistan when we are through with our elections. And then we'll have to see and assess the situation. And there may be some climb down from Pakistan, as I said, to facilitate greater stabilization of the relationship.
So that was a very informative kind of a discussion we just had. With that, I think we'll close it for today because we're running out of time. Thank you so very much for joining us, sir. I mean, I really appreciate again your taking time out, and we'd like to call you again if time permits for you to sort of discuss what happens next.
Thank you very much.
Once the elections are over, definitely we'd like to have you to tell us what we can expect next.
Thank you. It was a pleasure answering your questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That was Ambassador Sharat Sabharwal, former High Commissioner to Pakistan and Ambassador to Uzbekistan, who was talking to us about the recent crisis that is plaguing Pakistan and how it is different from the earlier crisis, which I suppose it really isn't. I hope you enjoyed this particular episode, and you can show us a little love by clicking on the like, share, and subscribe buttons below. I look forward to seeing you again. Until then, goodbye.